They say blood is thicker than water. That family will always have your back. That your children are your legacy, your greatest achievement, your reason for everything. I believed that once. I'm sitting here now in a studio apartment that costs more per month than my mortgage ever did. The walls are beige. Everything smells like industrial cleaner and sadness. There's a window that overlooks a parking lot, and if I crane my neck just right, I can see a sliver of sky between two buildings. This isn't where I thought I'd be at 72. My name is Margaret Holloway. For 46 years I lived in a 3-bedroom colonial on Sycamore Drive with a garden I tended every morning and a kitchen where I raised 2 children. I taught high school English for 33 years. I was the department head. I sponsored the Creative Writing Club. Former students still recognize me at the grocery store and tell me I changed their lives. But my own daughter? She saw me as a problem to be solved. An asset to be liquidated. An obstacle between her and what she wanted. This is the story of how Diane, my only daughter, my baby girl, the child I sacrificed everything for, decided I was more valuable to her as real estate than as a mother. And this is the story of how I made absolutely certain she learned what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing about these situations, they never do. It's not a single betrayal. It's 1,000 small erosions, each one so subtle you tell yourself you're imagining it. That you're being paranoid. That you're turning into one of those difficult elderly people who sees conspiracy in every kind gesture. The first crack appeared about 18 months ago, right after my 71st birthday. I was in the garden, my roses were having their second bloom of the season, absolutely stunning, when Diane pulled into the driveway in that Mercedes SUV her husband insists they need. She'd come alone, which was unusual. Normally she brought the kids, my grandchildren, Marcus and Sophie. But that day it was just her. "Mom, we need to talk," she said. Not happy belated birthday. Not the garden looks beautiful. Just straight into we need to talk with that tone people use when they've already made a decision and they're just going through the courtesy of pretending you have input. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd helped her with homework. Where we'd had breakfast before her first day of kindergarten. Where she'd told me she was pregnant with Marcus, her face glowing with excitement. "I'm worried about you," she began. I should have known right then. When someone starts with "I'm worried about you," what they really mean is "I'm worried about me and you're the reason." Worried how? I asked. I was genuinely confused. I was in good health. I drove. I cooked. I managed my finances. I had friends. A book club. I volunteered at the library. "You're here all alone in this big house," she said. "What if something happened? What if you fell and no one found you for days?" "I have a cell phone," I pointed out. "I have neighbors. Mrs. Chin checks on me every other day." "Mom." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold despite the August heat. "I've been looking into some options. There are these wonderful communities, active senior living. You'd have people around all the time. Activities. No yard work or home maintenance to worry about." I pulled my hand back. "You want to put me in a home?" "It's not a home, Mom. It's a community. Independent living. You'd have your own apartment. But there'd be staff if you needed help, Anne." "I don't need help." "Not yet," she said. And there it was. The real fear. Not that I was suffering now. That I might suffer later, and that suffering would become her responsibility. We argued. I said no. She pushed. I pushed back harder. Eventually she left, her jaw tight with frustration. I told myself it was over. That she'd see reason. That she was just being overprotective, worried after her father died 3 years ago. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Over the next few months, the campaign intensified. Diane started visiting more often, but now every visit had an agenda. She'd point out things wrong with the house. "Mom, this carpet is a tripping hazard. Look at how worn it is. Mom, these stairs are so steep. What if you miss a step? Mom, this bathroom doesn't have grab bars. You really should have grab bars." She brought her husband, Paul. Paul, who works in commercial real estate and sees everything as a potential transaction. He walked through my home like an appraiser, making noises about good bones and sought-after neighborhood and lot size. They brought the children less and less. When I asked why, Diane said they were busy with activities. But I knew. She was creating distance. making it easier to move me when the time came. Like you do with a pet before you surrender it to a shelter. She started talking about my finances. How was I managing on my pension and Social Security? Had I looked at my property taxes recently? They were going up. Maintenance costs for a house this size were substantial. Wouldn't it be such a relief not to worry about furnace repairs and roof leaks? Every conversation was an erosion. Every visit was a negotiation I hadn't agreed to participate in. And then came Thanksgiving. I hosted like I always did. The whole family came, Diane, Paul, the kids. My son Daniel flew in from Portland with his wife, Amy. I spent 2 days cooking. Turkey, stuffing, 3 kinds of pie. My kitchen was full of warmth and good smells and the kind of controlled chaos that comes with preparing a feast. We sat down to eat. I said grace. We passed dishes. Everything seemed normal. Then Diane tapped her wine glass with her fork. "Everyone, I have an announcement," she said. She looked at me with this smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mom's made a decision. She's going to move to Meadowbrook Senior Living. We've been looking at places and it's absolutely perfect. She'll be so much happier there." The room went silent. I felt like I'd been slapped. "No, I haven't," I said quietly. "Mom, I have made no such decision. We've discussed it." I said no. Multiple times. Daniel looked between us. "Wait, what's going on?" Diane's face tightened. "Mom's being stubborn. She can't stay here alone. It's not safe." "I'm sitting right here," I said, my voice sharper now. "And I'm perfectly capable of speaking for myself. I'm not moving." What followed was ugly. Diane cried. She said I was being selfish. That I wasn't thinking about anyone but myself. That she was trying to help me and I was making everything so hard. Paul backed her up with statistics about elderly falls and emergency room visits. Daniel tried to mediate, suggesting maybe we all take a breath and talk about this later. But the damage was done. The dinner I'd spent 2 days preparing sat half-eaten on the table. Diane grabbed her family and left before dessert. The pies I'd made sat untouched. I cleaned up alone while Daniel and Amy tried to help and fill the silence with cheerful small talk that felt like screaming into a void. That night, lying in bed, I understood something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about my safety or my happiness. This was about control. About Diane deciding what my life should look like and getting angry when I wouldn't comply. But I still didn't understand how far she was willing to go. December came. The holidays felt hollow. Diane and I weren't speaking. She sent a card, one of those generic ones from a box set, with just her signature. No personal message. No love, Diane. Just her name, like a business correspondence. Daniel called regularly from Portland, trying to play peacemaker. "She's just worried, Mom. Maybe look at some places? Just to ease her mind?" But I knew what just looking would become. The same thing just discussing had become. A fait accompli where my input was treated as a formality to be overcome. January arrived with a cold snap that froze the pipes in Mrs. Chen's house. I helped her deal with the plumber, let her use my shower until hers was fixed. See? I wasn't some helpless old woman. I was part of a community. I helped my neighbors. They helped me. But then things started happening. Small things at first. My mail went missing, not all of it, just specific pieces. Bills mostly. I'd call the companies and they'd say they'd sent statements. I never received them. I started going paperless for everything I could. Then my credit card was declined at the grocery store. Embarrassing, standing there with a full cart while the cashier tried it 3 times. I called the bank from the parking lot. They said my payment was late. I'd never been late on a payment in my life. They said the statement went to an old address. What address? I asked. They gave me Diane's address. I never authorized that, I said. It was changed online using your security information. My security information. My mother's maiden name. My father's middle name. Information Diane had. I fixed it. I changed all my passwords. I signed up for credit monitoring. But the pattern was clear now. She was building a case. Creating a narrative of an old woman who couldn't manage her affairs. Who missed bills. Who was becoming forgetful and unreliable. I wasn't paranoid. I was paying attention. February brought a new escalation. I was at book club, we were discussing The Great Believers, when my phone rang. I normally wouldn't answer during book club, but it was the police non-emergency line. Mrs. Holloway? This is Officer Martinez. We received a wellness check request for your address. Are you all right? I'm fine. I'm at book club. Who requested a wellness check? Your daughter. She said she'd been trying to reach you for 2 days and was worried you might be hurt. I'd spoken to her 3 days ago. We'd had a terse conversation about Marcus's birthday party. She'd made it clear I wasn't invited because it might be too much for me. I'd hung up angry but fine. I'm perfectly well, I told the officer. There's been a misunderstanding. 2 days later, it happened again. This time I was at the dentist. Another wellness check. Another call from my daughter claiming she couldn't reach me. She was establishing a pattern. Calling the police. Creating official records of an elderly woman whose daughter was so worried she needed law enforcement to intervene. I confronted her. Called her directly. Why are you calling the police on me? I'm worried about you, Mom. You're not answering your phone. I'm living my life. I don't have to report my whereabouts to you every hour. See? This is what I'm talking about. You're getting paranoid. Hostile. These are signs. I hung up on her. My hands were shaking. March is when everything accelerated. I got a call from an attorney. Not my attorney, I'd used the same law firm for years to handle my will and estate planning. This was someone new. Mrs. Holloway, I'm calling from Patterson and Associates. We've been retained by your daughter regarding a guardianship petition. The word hit me like cold water. Guardianship. What are you talking about? Your daughter is concerned about your ability to manage your affairs. She's filed a petition with the court to be appointed your legal guardian. There will be a hearing on April 14th. You'll receive official notice, but I wanted to reach out and see if you'd like to discuss this matter. Are you her attorney? I'm calling as a courtesy. You're her attorney. I hung up. My heart was racing. I called my attorney immediately. Patricia Chen, no relation to my neighbor, had handled my will when Thomas died. She was sharp and direct. Margaret, tell me exactly what's happening. I told her everything. The pressure to move. The missing mail. The credit card changes. The wellness checks. And now this, guardianship. Patricia was quiet for a moment. This is serious. If a court grants guardianship, you lose your legal autonomy. She would control your finances, your housing decisions, your medical care. Everything. Can she actually do this? I'm not incompetent. That's what we'll need to prove. But Margaret, these cases can be complicated. Judges err on the side of caution with elderly petitioners. They don't want to read about someone who fell and died alone because the court didn't intervene. Your daughter will bring witnesses. Probably those wellness check reports. Evidence of missed bills or confused behavior. Evidence she manufactured. Which we'll argue. But you need to be prepared. This is going to be a fight. The official notice came 3 days later. Diane was petitioning for full guardianship based on my decreased capacity to manage financial and personal affairs and unsafe living conditions. Unsafe living conditions. My home. The house I'd maintained meticulously for 46 years. I was terrified. But terror has a way of crystallizing into something harder. Something like rage. I started documenting everything. Every conversation. Every interaction. I installed a security camera in my doorbell, one of those smart ones that records everything. I kept detailed notes of my daily activities. I had my doctor write a letter attesting to my mental and physical health. I wasn't going down without a fight. But Diane had one more move to make. And it was the one I never saw coming. On March 28th, I woke up feeling off. Nothing dramatic. Just wrong. Slightly dizzy. A headache that felt like pressure behind my eyes. I attributed it to stress. I'd been sleeping poorly, grinding my teeth, waking up at 3 a.m. with my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. I made coffee. The dizziness got worse. I sat down. The room tilted. And then I don't remember anything clearly. I have fragments. Flashes. Diane's voice. Paul's face. Someone helping me walk. Cold air. Car doors. The next thing I remember with any clarity is waking up in a bed that wasn't mine. Beige walls. Industrial smell. The sound of a television through thin walls. A window with those vertical blinds that only exist in hotels and institutions. I tried to sit up. My head pounded. There was an 4 in my arm. A nurse came in, young woman, kind face, name tag that said Jennifer. Oh good, you're awake. How are you feeling, Mrs. Holloway? Where am I? You're at Meadowbrook Senior Living. You had a pretty bad spell yesterday. Your daughter brought you in. Doctor says you were severely dehydrated, possibly a minor stroke. We've been monitoring you overnight. I want to go home. Let's just make sure you're stable first, okay? Doctor will be in soon. But the doctor didn't come soon. Hours passed. I tried to get up, but I was dizzy, weak. When I insisted on leaving, Jennifer gently suggested I wait, that I needed to be cleared medically. Diane came in the afternoon. She looked tired but satisfied. Like someone who'd finished a difficult project. Mom, thank God. You scared me so badly. Paul and I came to check on you yesterday and you could barely stand. You didn't remember calling me. You were so confused. I didn't call you. You did, Mom. You said you didn't feel well. When we got there, you could barely walk. We brought you straight here. I want to go home. You are home. This is your new apartment. We moved your essentials while you were being evaluated. Your furniture will come over the next few days. The words didn't make sense. What are you talking about? The house was too much for you. We all knew it. This is better. Safer. There are nurses here 24/7. You'll have activities, friends, meals prepared. Everything you need. I didn't agree to this. Mom, you're not well. You had a stroke. Or something like a stroke. You need care. And the house, we need to talk about the house. She pulled out papers. Lots of papers. Her expression was businesslike now, the concerned daughter mask slipping. The market is strong right now. Paul has a buyer lined up, cash offer, quick close. We can get above asking price. The money will go into a trust for your care here. This place isn't cheap, but the house equity should cover several years and… No. Mom, you can't sell my house. It's my house. She smiled. Patient. Patronizing. Actually, about that. You signed papers giving me power of attorney. When we brought you in yesterday. You were very confused, but we needed to make medical decisions, and the paperwork just made sense to handle at the same time. Paul's attorney was very helpful. I felt like I was falling. I didn't sign anything. You did. I have the notarized documents. You were confused but legally competent enough to sign. It's all proper. That's when I understood the full scope of it. The dizziness. The confusion. She drugged me. Something in my food or drink, something that would wear off but that would leave me disoriented enough to sign whatever she put in front of me. And now she had power of attorney. Control over my medical care. Control over my finances. Control over my property. The guardianship hearing was in 2 weeks. She didn't need to wait for the court anymore. She'd already won. I want to tell you I leapt out of bed. That I marched out of there and called the police and fixed everything immediately. But that's not what happened. I was trapped. Legally trapped. I was in a facility where the staff had been told I was a confused elderly woman who needed supervision. When I insisted on leaving, they gently but firmly told me I couldn't go without being discharged. When I demanded to see my discharge papers, they said my daughter was handling that with the doctor. When I tried to call Patricia, my attorney, my phone was dead. Diane said she'd charge it for me and bring it back. She didn't. I was alone in this beige room, watching my entire life disappear while people smiled and told me it was for my own good. They brought me food. I didn't eat it. I didn't trust anything they gave me. I drank water from the bathroom sink and refused all medication. Diane came back the next day with Paul and the kids. Marcus and Sophie looked uncomfortable. Marcus was 14 now, old enough to sense something was wrong. Sophie was 11, still young enough to accept the adult narrative. "Hi, Grandma," Sophie said, hugging me carefully like I was made of glass. "Mom says you're going to live here now. Can we decorate your room?" I looked at Diane. "Can I speak to you privately?" We walked into the hallway. Paul stayed with the kids. "You drugged me," I said quietly. "You drugged me and forged my signature." "Mom, you're paranoid. This is exactly why you need to be here. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking perfectly clearly. You want my house. You've wanted it since last summer. And you're willing to drug and kidnap your own mother to get it." Her face hardened. The mask finally dropped completely. "You're being dramatic. No one drugged you. You had a health episode. And I didn't kidnap you, I'm taking care of you. Someone has to. You're clearly not capable of making rational decisions. Let me leave. Right now. Call off whatever arrangements you've made and let me go home. You don't have a home. The listing goes live tomorrow. Paul's buyer is ready to move forward. The closing is scheduled for May 15th. I'll fight this. I'll call the police. My attorney will tell you that I have legal power of attorney, properly notarized and witnessed, and that a judge is about to grant me guardianship based on mounting evidence of your declining capacity. You can fight. You'll lose. And you'll waste money you don't have on legal fees while the court case drags on and your house sits empty accumulating taxes and maintenance costs. She paused. Or you can accept that this is happening. Try to make the best of it. Let us take care of you. She actually said that. Let us take care of you. Like this was care. Like theft and kidnapping and drugging were acts of love. I will never forgive you for this, I told her. She sighed. You're upset. I understand. But you'll adjust. Everyone does. The staff here is excellent. You'll make friends. And you won't have to worry about anything anymore. She walked back into the room, collected her family, and left. I stood in the hallway of that place and felt something inside me break. Not my will. Something else. Some last remnant of maternal love. Some final thread of belief that my daughter was a good person making bad choices. She wasn't. She was exactly who she was showing me she was. And I needed to start believing her. Part 4, The Long Game. Here's what they don't tell you about these situations. When someone has power of attorney, when you're in a facility, when the legal system has decided you're for your own good, fighting back is nearly impossible. But not completely impossible. I had advantages Diane didn't know about. I'd been a teacher for 33 years. I dealt with intelligent, manipulative teenagers who thought they were smarter than me. I knew how to be patient. How to observe. How to wait for the right moment. And I knew something about Diane she'd forgotten. I taught her everything she knows about planning and manipulation. But I didn't teach her everything I know. First, I needed to get out of immediate supervision. That meant playing the role she'd cast me in, the confused, compliant elderly woman who was accepting her new situation. It killed me to do it. Every instinct screamed to fight, to rage, to demand my rights. But rage would get me sedated and moved to the memory care unit. Compliance would get me freedom of movement. So I became compliant. I ate the food. I took the vitamins they offered but palmed any actual medications. I attended an activities group. I smiled at the staff. I said yes when Diane visited and asked if I was adjusting. You were right, I told her after a week. This is easier. I don't have to worry about the house. The relief on her face was palpable. She thought she'd won. Within 2 weeks I had ground privileges. I could go to the common areas unsupervised. Use the library. Attend activities. The staff decided I was doing so well with the transition. The facility had computers in the library for residents. That's where I started building my case. I couldn't use my own email. Diane had changed all my passwords when she got power of attorney. But I created new accounts. Knew everything. I documented every detail of what had happened. I reached out to Daniel in Portland. Not by phone, those could be monitored, but through a Facebook account I created under a pseudonym. I explained everything. He was horrified. He wanted to fly out immediately. I told him no. Not yet. I needed him to be my ace in the hole, someone Diane didn't know was involved. I contacted Patricia, my attorney, through her firm's website contact form. Explained that I was being held against my will, that the power of attorney documents were signed under duress while I was drugged. Patricia sent her paralegal to visit me. The staff almost didn't let him in, but he was insistent, and they couldn't legally bar my attorney's office from seeing me. We talked in the facility library. I told him everything. This is elder abuse, he said. Financial exploitation. Possibly false imprisonment. We can fight this. How long will it take? Months. Maybe longer. The guardianship hearing is in a week. Even if we contest it, she has the power of attorney and you're currently in supervised care. It's an uphill battle. And my house. If it sells before we can get a court order, recovering it becomes exponentially more complicated. I thought about this. What if I can prove she drugged me? Get a toxicology report. Did you get one done at the time? No. I didn't even realize what had happened until it was too late. Then it's her word against yours. And she has paperwork showing you were treated for a medical episode, that you signed documents in front of a notary. Margaret, I'm not saying we can't win eventually. But the immediate situation. I understand. What I understood was that the legal system moves slowly. And I didn't have time for slow. I needed a different approach. I had one major advantage. Diane thought I was defeated. She thought the hard part was over, that I'd accepted my fate. She'd gotten sloppy. She visited less frequently. When she did visit, she brought decorating catalogs for the apartment, talked about how much easier my life would be now. She mentioned that the house was in escrow, that buyers were thrilled, that closing was on schedule. She never mentioned that she'd moved into the house. I found out from Marcus. He was visiting with Sophie and he let it slip. The new house is cool, Grandma. My room is bigger. New house? I asked carefully. Oh. He looked uncomfortable. I mean your old house. We're living there now until we sell our place. Mom says it makes sense since it's just sitting empty. Of course. Why pay for their mortgage and mine when she could just move in? The house that was supposed to be sold to fund my care, they were living in it. Rent-free. Using my furniture, sleeping in my bed, eating at my table. That's when the plan started to form. The guardianship hearing was April 14th. Patricia fought hard. She presented evidence of my mental competency, statements from my doctor, my book club friends, former colleagues. She questioned the circumstances of the power of attorney signing. But Diane came prepared. She had the wellness check reports. A statement from the facility doctor about my health episode. The notarized power of attorney documents. Paul testified about finding me disoriented and confused. And she cried. Oh, she cried beautifully. Talked about how hard this was, how much she loved me, how she was just trying to keep me safe. The judge was sympathetic. To her. He saw a devoted daughter trying to help an elderly mother who was in denial about her declining health. I'm granting limited guardianship, he ruled. Mrs. Holloway, your daughter will have authority over your health care and financial decisions, but this will be reviewed in 6 months. I'm also ordering a comprehensive medical and psychological evaluation to determine your ongoing care needs. Limited guardianship. It could have been worse. He could have granted full guardianship. But it was bad enough. I showed no reaction. Just nodded calmly when the judge asked if I understood. Patricia was frustrated. We'll appeal. This isn't over. But I knew appeals took months. By then the house would be sold. The money would be gone. Fighting would be exponentially harder. No. I wasn't going to wait for the legal system to save me. I was going to save myself. Part 5, The Weapon. Here's what Diane forgot. I owned that house for 46 years. I knew every inch of it. Every quirk. Every secret. And most importantly, I knew what was in the walls. When Thomas died 3 years ago, I'd been overwhelmed with grief and paperwork. Life insurance, bank accounts, the will, the estate. His lawyer, not Patricia, Thomas's business attorney, had helped me sort through everything. There were assets I'd need to handle. Investments. The house deed. But there was also something else. Thomas had been a collector. Not of anything dramatic, he wasn't buying stolen art or rare coins. He collected documents. Historical papers. Rare books and manuscripts. He'd spent 40 years acquiring pieces, and some of them were worth substantial amounts. Not millions. But hundreds of thousands in aggregate. When he died, his estate lawyer had advised me to get everything appraised and properly insured. Some pieces needed climate-controlled storage. Some needed to be in a safe deposit box. I'd been so overwhelmed. I'd told him I'd handle it. And then I'd gotten busy with teaching my final year before retirement, and with grief and with life. And honestly, I'd forgotten about half the collection. The valuable pieces were locked in the safe in Thomas's study. But the really rare documents, the ones he'd been most proud of, were hidden. Thomas was paranoid about theft. He'd created a hiding space in the house. Behind a built-in bookshelf in the guest bedroom. You had to know exactly which book to pull, a first edition of Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, and the shelf would swing open like something from a movie. Behind it was a climate-controlled compartment he'd had specially built. Inside that compartment were his crown jewels, a signed letter from Frederick Douglass, a first edition of The Great Gatsby signed by Fitzgerald, an original manuscript page from Langston Hughes, and several other pieces. The collection was insured. I had documentation of every piece. Provenance, authentication certificates, appraisal values from 3 years ago. All sitting in a file in my study. A file that was still in the house. Because Diane had moved my essential items to Meadowbrook, but she hadn't cleared out my study yet. Too many papers. Too much work. She'd get to it eventually. But I needed those documents. And I needed to get them before she found that hidden compartment and realized what was there. Because here's the thing about power of attorney, it gives you control over someone's assets. But it doesn't make those assets yours. Not legally. Not until probate or a properly executed sale. If Diane sold my house with that collection still hidden in the walls, and the new owners found it, there would be questions. Investigations. Proof that she'd been negligent or deliberately concealing assets. But if I could document that I'd specifically told her about the collection, that I'd instructed her to secure it, and she'd ignored me or refused, that was financial exploitation. Elder abuse. Criminal. I just needed to prove it. Getting out of Meadowbrook wasn't hard. I had ground privileges. I told the front desk I was going to the library for book club. They barely looked up. I'd saved $20 from the small weekly allowance they gave residents for the vending machines. I took a lift to Sycamore Drive. It was late afternoon. Diane would be at work. Paul too. The kids would be at school. The house should be empty. My hands shook as I used my key. For a horrible moment, I thought she might have changed the locks. But the key turned. I stepped into my home. It looked wrong. Different. They'd moved their furniture in. The family photos on the walls were theirs, not mine. My sofa was gone. My dining table, the one we'd had Thanksgiving at, pushed into a corner, replaced with their modern glass monstrosity. I wanted to stand there and mourn. But I didn't have time. I went to my study. They'd put boxes in here, their storage overflow. But my filing cabinet was still there. I found the file marked Thomas Estate. Inside was everything. The insurance documentation. The provenance papers. The appraisal certificates. I photographed every page with the smartphone Daniel had secretly sent me. Then I took the originals. They wouldn't realize they were gone until they looked for them. Then I went to the guest bedroom. My heart was pounding. What if they'd found the compartment? What if it was already empty? I pulled the Ellison First Edition. The shelf clicked and swung open. Everything was still there. Untouched. Diane had no idea it existed. I didn't take the items. Taking them would be theft, and I needed to be completely above board legally. But I documented everything. Photos from every angle. Close-ups showing the authentication marks. The climate control unit still running. Then I did something that would seem strange, but it was calculated. I left a note. Just a simple piece of paper, tucked into the Gatsby First Edition. Diane, I told you about this collection on April 15th. I instructed you to secure these items and add them to the estate inventory. You refused. This is documentation that you were aware of these assets and chose not to protect them. This note is dated and will be photographed. Margaret. I dated it for the next day, April 15th. The day after the guardianship hearing. Then I photographed the note in place. I closed the compartment. Reset the shelf. And I left. Back at Meadowbrook, I uploaded everything to a cloud storage account Daniel had set up for me. Sent copies to Patricia. Sent copies to Daniel. Emailed copies to myself at 3 different email addresses. Then I waited. The next day, I requested a meeting with Diane. The staff called her and she came that evening looking annoyed. What is it, Mom? I have a million things to do. I need to discuss Thomas's collection with you. What collection? His documents. The rare books and manuscripts. They're still in the house. They need to be properly secured and added to the estate inventory. She waved her hand dismissively. The stuff in Dad's safe? Paul looked at it. It's not worth much. Not just the safe. The hidden compartment in the guest bedroom. I watched her face carefully. No recognition. She genuinely didn't know about it. Mom, there's no hidden compartment. You're confused. Behind the bookshelf. Pull the Ellison First Edition. The shelf opens. There's a climate-controlled space with several extremely valuable pieces. I need you to secure them. Mom. Her voice took on that patient, patronizing tone. There's no secret compartment. You might be thinking of something from a book you read. Or maybe something Dad talked about wanting to do but never did. I'm not confused. The compartment exists. The collection is there. It's insured. I have documentation. And I need you to secure it immediately. She sighed. Okay. Sure. I'll check the guest bedroom. But, Mom, there's nothing there. You're remembering things that didn't happen. It's okay. It's part of aging. Will you check tonight? I'll check when I have time. The house is chaos right now with the move and getting it ready to show. Diane, I'm asking you directly as the person with power of attorney over my estate to verify and secure assets worth approximately $300,000. I'm documenting this request. That got her attention. $300,000? At minimum. The Douglas letter alone appraised at $75,000 3 years ago. It's likely worth more now. I could see the wheels turning. She didn't believe me. She thought I was confused, making things up. But $300,000 was enough money that she couldn't completely ignore it. Fine. I'll look. But Mom, if there's nothing there, we need to talk to your doctor about these confusion episodes. Thank you, I said simply. She left. I sat in my beige room and waited. I knew exactly what would happen next. Diane would go home. She might mention it to Paul. They'd probably laugh about poor confused Margaret making up stories about hidden treasure. But eventually, maybe that night, maybe the next day, curiosity would win. She'd go to the guest bedroom. She'd pull the Ellison First Edition. And the shelf would swing open. She'd find the compartment. The collection. The climate control unit humming away, proving this wasn't some recent delusion, but something that had been maintained for years. And she'd find the note. The note that proved I'd told her about this on April 15th, after the guardianship hearing. The note that documented her refusal to secure the assets. Except I'd already photographed that note yesterday, April 14th. The metadata on my photos would show they were taken before the date on the note. Before I'd supposedly told Diane about the collection. Which meant what? It meant I'd planted evidence showing she'd been told about assets she was legally responsible for protecting. And when she inevitably didn't secure them properly, when she either tried to keep them for herself or ignored them or handled them incorrectly, I'd have proof of financial exploitation. But here's the beautiful part. She couldn't remove the note without proving she'd found the compartment. And if she found the compartment, she was legally obligated to report those assets. Add them to the estate inventory. Handle them properly. If she did that, fine. The assets would be protected and eventually used for my actual care or returned to me if I regained control. But I knew Diane. I knew exactly what she'd do. She'd see $300,000 in assets I'd supposedly forgotten about. Assets she had control over as my guardian. And she'd start figuring out how to convert them to cash without proper documentation. How to sell them quietly. How to pocket the money. And the moment she did that, she'd be committing a crime I could prove. 3 days passed. Diane didn't visit. Didn't call. On the 4th day, she showed up with Paul. Both of them. Her face was tight. His was calculating. Mom, we found the compartment. Oh, good. Did you secure the items? We're handling it. But we need to talk about the documentation. Do you have the insurance papers? The provenance certificates? They should be in my study. In the filing cabinet. Thomas estate folder. Paul and Diane exchanged a look. That folder isn't there, Paul said. Are you sure that's where you kept it? Interesting. They'd already looked. Already realized the documentation was missing. Which meant they'd been thinking about how to handle the collection, and they'd discovered they couldn't sell or transfer anything without proper papers. I'm certain that's where it was. Perhaps it got misplaced during the move. Mom, this is important. Diane's voice had an edge. Without documentation, we can't properly value or insure these items. We need those papers. I understand. I'm sorry they seem to be missing. Perhaps they're in one of the boxes you moved from my study. More looks between them. We'll find them, Paul said. In the meantime, we've moved the items from the compartment to our safe deposit box. For security. Ah. So they'd taken possession. Moved assets under their control. Without proper documentation or authority beyond the power of attorney. That's good, I said. You should probably report that to the insurance company. Let them know the items have been relocated. We're handling it, Diane said quickly. Too quickly. They left shortly after. I watched them go and felt the first real smile I'd had in weeks. They'd taken the bait. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched everything unfold exactly as I'd predicted. Daniel, acting on my instructions, contacted the insurance company that held the policy on Thomas's collection. He identified himself as my son, expressed concern that valuable insured items might not be properly secured during my transition to care, and asked if the policy was still active and if any changes had been reported. The insurance company confirmed the policy was active. No changes had been reported. No claims had been filed. The items were still listed as being at the Sycamore Drive address. Daniel then asked what the proper procedure would be if the items needed to be moved. The agent explained that any relocation required written notice, an updated security assessment, and potential policy modifications depending on the new storage location. And who would be authorized to make those changes? Daniel asked. The policyholder, Margaret Holloway, or someone with proper legal authority acting on her behalf with documentation. Daniel thanked them and ended the call. Then he did something brilliant. He filed a complaint with Adult Protective Services. Not about the house. Not about the guardianship. About the specific failure to properly secure and report insured assets worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Assets that a legal guardian was obligated to protect. APS opened an investigation. Meanwhile, Diane was making her move. I know this because Marcus told me. He came to visit. Diane had started bringing him alone sometimes, probably to make sure he maintained a relationship with his grandmother for appearance's sake. We were playing cards in the common room when he said, "Mom's been really stressed lately. She keeps talking to people on the phone about appraisals and authentication." Oh. Yeah. Something about Grandpa's old books. She's trying to figure out what they're worth. She had some guy come to the house, but he said he needed paperwork she doesn't have. That must be frustrating for her. She said something about maybe selling them, as is to someone who doesn't ask too many questions. He rolled his eyes. I don't really get it. But Dad seems worried. He keeps saying they need to be careful. Careful? Yes. Because Paul at least understood they were operating in legally murky territory. They were trying to liquidate assets without proper documentation. Trying to find a buyer who wouldn't ask too many questions about provenance or ownership. Trying to pocket money that should have been in the estate inventory. And every day they spent trying to do this quietly was another day of evidence that they were exploiting rather than protecting my interests. The APS investigation started slowly. A social worker came to interview me at Meadowbrook. Nice woman, professional. She asked about my care, my living situation, my relationship with my daughter. I was careful. Not accusatory. Just factual. Diane has been managing my affairs since I had a health episode in late March. She has power of attorney and limited guardianship. And how do you feel about that arrangement? I would prefer to manage my own affairs. But I understand there were concerns about my capacity. Are you aware of your husband's document collection? Yes. It was properly insured and stored. I asked Diane to ensure those items were secured and reported to the insurance company. I'm not sure if she's done that yet. When did you ask her to do that? Mid-April. Shortly after the guardianship hearing. And has she reported back to you about the status of those items? She said she moved them to a safe deposit box. But she hasn't mentioned contacting the insurance company or updating the estate inventory. The social worker made notes. Mrs. Holloway, do you have any concerns about how your assets are being managed? I paused. Looked uncertain. I want to believe Diane is acting in my best interests. But I do worry. The house is being sold very quickly. I haven't seen any accounting of the expenses or the sale proceeds. And these collection items, they were important to my husband. I want to make sure they're handled properly. More notes. Would you be willing to undergo a comprehensive evaluation? Medical and psychological? To assess your current capacity. Absolutely. I've been asking for that. That was true. Patricia had been pushing for an independent evaluation since the guardianship hearing. Diane had been blocking it, saying I was too fragile for the stress. But now APS was involved. And they could order an evaluation regardless of what Diane wanted. Part 7, the sheriff comes at 10 a.m. The evaluation took place in early May. A psychiatrist, a neurologist, and a social worker spent 6 hours with me over 2 days. Cognitive tests. Medical examination. Interviews about my daily functioning, my memory, my decision-making. I passed everything. Scored high on every cognitive measure. The neurologist found no evidence of dementia, stroke, or any condition that would impair my judgment. The psychiatrist's report was even better. Mrs. Holloway presents as cognitively intact, articulate, and fully capable of managing her own affairs. She demonstrates clear recall of recent and past events, excellent judgment, and appropriate emotional responses. There is no evidence of any psychiatric or cognitive condition that would warrant guardianship. Patricia filed an emergency motion to dissolve the guardianship and revoke the power of attorney based on the evaluation results and mounting evidence of financial exploitation. The hearing was scheduled for May 18th. But Diane was moving fast. The house sale was scheduled to close on May 15th. 3 days before the hearing. Once that money was in an account she controlled, getting it back would be exponentially harder. I needed to stop the sale. Patricia filed for a restraining order against the sale, arguing that there were unresolved questions about asset valuation and management. But real estate transactions are hard to stop once they're in motion. The judge was reluctant to interfere in a private sale without clear evidence of fraud. I need more, Patricia told me. Something concrete showing she's acting against your interests. What about the collection? The APS investigation? That's ongoing. But it's not moving fast enough to stop the house sale. I thought about this. About timing. About what I needed to make this work. Patricia, can you get a court order for an inventory of all assets currently under Diane's control as my guardian? Probably. Why? Because she moved items from my house to a safe deposit box without proper documentation or insurance notification. If she's ordered to produce an inventory and can't properly account for those items, or if she's tried to sell them, that's proof of exploitation. Patricia's eyes lit up. And it would be grounds for immediate removal of guardianship and potentially criminal charges. How fast can you get that order? Maybe by tomorrow if I file an emergency motion. Do it. The court order came through on May 13th. Diane was ordered to provide a complete inventory of all assets under her control as my guardian, including documentation, location, and current status of each item, by May 17th, the day before the hearing and 2 days after the house was scheduled to close. I knew exactly what this meant. If Diane had already sold items from the collection without documentation, she'd have to admit it or lie. If she lied and we could prove it, that was fraud. If she admitted it, that was exploitation. If she still had the items but couldn't produce proper documentation, she'd have to explain why she'd moved insured assets without notifying the insurance company. There was no good answer for her. Patricia called me that afternoon. Margaret, Diane's attorney, just contacted me. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? They're offering to return full control to you. Dissolve the guardianship, revoke the power of attorney, return you to the house. In exchange for you agreeing not to pursue any civil or criminal action against Diane. What about the house sale? They're willing to cancel it. Pay any penalties for breaking the contract. I let the silence stretch out. Margaret? This is a good offer. You get everything back. No lengthy court battle. What about the collection? They'll return all items to you with a full accounting. No criminal investigation? That would be part of the agreement. You'd have to decline to cooperate with any prosecution. I thought about this. About Diane, desperate now, realizing how badly she'd miscalculated. Willing to give up everything to avoid criminal charges. Part of me wanted to take it. Get my life back. My house. My independence. But another part, the part that had been drugged and kidnapped and robbed, wanted her to face consequences. Tell them no. Margaret, tell them no. I want the inventory by the deadline. I want the hearing. I want everything in the open. If you do this, you might lose. Courts are unpredictable. And even if you win, you're going to damage your relationship with your daughter permanently. Patricia, that relationship was damaged the moment she drugged me and stole my house. I'm not interested in repairing it. I'm interested in justice. There was a pause. Then, okay. I'll let them know. May 15th came. The house sale was supposed to close. It didn't. Diane's attorney filed for an emergency continuance, citing unresolved estate matters. The buyers were furious. Threatened to sue for specific performance. Their attorney started making noise about going after Diane personally for any losses. May 17th. The deadline for the inventory. Diane's attorney filed the paperwork at 4:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the court clerk's office closed. Patricia called me immediately after receiving the filing. Margaret, you need to see this. She emailed me the document. I read it on Daniel's phone. He'd flown in that morning and was staying at a hotel near Meadowbrook. The inventory was a mess. Incomplete. Vague descriptions of items without proper valuations. The collection items were listed as various books and documents, approximately $50,000 value. $50,000. For items we had documentation showing were appraised at over $300,000 3 years ago. And there was a note at the bottom: several items from the collection have been sold to cover the ward's care expenses. Proceeds deposited into estate account. She sold them, I breathed. Without proper documentation. Without updating the insurance. Without getting current appraisals. And Margaret, look at the dates. I looked. The sales had occurred in late April and early May. Before the APS investigation. Before the court order for inventory. But also before she'd properly established that those items were hers to sell. She's in trouble, Patricia said. Yes. She is. The hearing on May 18th was nothing like the guardianship hearing. This time I had evidence. Documentation. An APS investigator testified about the mishandling of the collection. The insurance company sent a representative who confirmed that no one had notified them about moving or selling insured items, which meant any sales had occurred without proper coverage or documentation. Patricia presented the psychiatric evaluation showing I was fully competent. And then she did something beautiful. She presented the metadata from my photographs. The ones taken on April 14th showing the collection in place, the note I'd written, the climate control unit running. Mrs. Holloway documented this collection the day before the guardianship hearing, Patricia told the judge. She then specifically instructed her daughter about these assets. Her daughter dismissed her concerns, moved the items without proper procedure, and then sold several pieces without proper documentation or authority. This isn't a case of a confused elderly woman. This is a case of financial exploitation of a competent adult by someone who assumed she could hide behind a guardianship order. Diane's attorney tried to push back, argued that Diane had been acting in good faith, trying to manage assets for my care, that the sales were necessary to cover my expenses at Meadowbrook. The care expenses at Meadowbrook are approximately $4,000 per month, Patricia countered. Mrs. Holloway has sufficient income from her pension and Social Security to cover that. There was no need to liquidate assets. And even if there had been, there are proper procedures for selling estate items under guardianship. None of those procedures were followed. The judge looked at Diane. Ms. Holloway, did you notify the insurance company before moving these items? I know, Your Honor. I didn't realize I needed to. Did you get current appraisals before selling them? The pieces were appraised 3 years ago. I used those values. Did you attempt to find the documentation your mother indicated existed? Diane's jaw tightened. My mother was confused about what documentation existed. I searched and couldn't find the specific files she mentioned. Did you inform the court when filing your inventory that you had already sold items from the collection? Silence. Ms. Holloway? I included it in the notes section of the inventory. A brief mention that several items were sold, without specifying which items, to whom, or for how much. That's not a proper accounting. The judge looked at the papers in front of him for a long moment. I'm dissolving the guardianship effective immediately. Ms. Holloway, you are removed as guardian. Mrs. Margaret Holloway, you are restored to full legal capacity and control of your affairs. Diane's face went white. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering a full forensic accounting of all transactions conducted under the guardianship and power of attorney. Ms. Holloway, you are to return any unsold items from the collection immediately. You are to provide a complete accounting of all sold items, including buyer information, sale prices, and current location of proceeds. And I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential elder abuse and financial exploitation. He banged his gavel. It was over. I moved back into my house on May 20th. Diane and Paul had to pack up their belongings and leave within 48 hours. I had a locksmith change all the locks while they were moving. I didn't want any chance of them retaining access. Diane didn't speak to me during the move. just directed the movers with tight-lipped efficiency while Paul made phone calls in the driveway, probably to their lawyer. The kids came to say goodbye. Marcus hugged me carefully. "I'm sorry, Grandma," he whispered. "I didn't know what Mom was doing." "I know, sweetheart. This isn't your fault," Sophie cried. She was young enough that she didn't understand the details, just that Grandma and Mom were fighting and everything was changing. I hugged her tight. "I love you. That hasn't changed. This is between your mother and me." After they left, I walked through my house alone. Really alone for the first time in 2 months. Someone, probably Diane, in a final petty gesture, had taken several items that were mine. Nothing valuable enough to be worth calling the police about. Just personal things. Photos. A quilt my mother had made. Some of my favorite books. Small thefts on top of the larger ones. A reminder of who she'd become. I stood in my kitchen and felt empty. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just tired and sad and older than my 72 years. I'd won. But what exactly had I won? The forensic accounting took 3 months. The accountant determined that Diane had sold 5 items from the collection for a total of $63,000. The items, if properly sold through reputable auction houses with proper documentation, would have fetched approximately $190,000. She'd sold them cheap, quickly, to buyers who didn't ask questions. And she'd deposited the money into an account she controlled, ostensibly for my care, but she'd already withdrawn $30,000 for administrative expenses that were never properly documented. The district attorney filed charges: financial exploitation of an elderly person, theft, and abuse of power of attorney. All felonies. Diane's attorney negotiated a plea deal. She pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for full restitution and 3 years of supervised probation. No jail time, but a permanent criminal record. And she had to pay back not just the money she'd taken, but the difference between what she'd sold items for and what they were worth. Plus legal fees. Mine and hers. It bankrupted them. Paul filed for divorce 6 months later. Diane had to sell their actual house to cover the restitution and legal fees. The last I heard, she was living in an apartment and working 2 jobs to make ends meet. The kids live primarily with Paul now. I see them sometimes. Marcus comes by every few weeks. Sophie is still young enough that Paul can filter what she knows, and I think he's told her some version of the story where her mother made mistakes but was trying to help. Maybe that's better. Maybe she doesn't need to know the full truth yet. Daniel visits more often now. He feels guilty that he was across the country when this was happening, even though I tell him there was nothing he could have done earlier. I should have known something was wrong, he says. She was very careful. Very calculated. And she knew I'd be too embarrassed to reach out for help at first. "Are you okay?" he asks me. "Really okay?" I think about this question a lot. Am I okay? I have my house back. My independence. My dignity. The legal system eventually worked. Justice was served. But I lost my daughter. Not to death or distance, but to greed. To a fundamental moral failure I didn't see coming and maybe should have. I think about the little girl I raised. The teenager who'd come to me with her problems. The young woman who'd called me crying when she was pregnant with Marcus because she was scared and excited and needed her mother. Where did that person go? Or was she always capable of this and I just never saw it because she'd never had enough motivation before? These are the questions that keep me up at night. I'm sitting in my garden now. It's October and the roses are preparing for dormancy. I've been cutting them back, getting everything ready for winter. Mrs. Chen comes over with tea like she used to. We sit on the porch and talk about nothing important. Her grandchildren. The neighborhood gossip. The weather. Normal life. The kind of life I thought I'd lost. My book club welcomed me back. Several members had known something was wrong when I disappeared. They'd asked about me, but Diane had told them I'd moved to be closer to her and wasn't taking calls. They believed it because why wouldn't they? You trust that adult children have their parents' best interests at heart. One of them, Janet, apologized for not pushing harder to contact me. "Don't apologize," I told her. "This isn't on you. This is on Diane. And maybe on me for not seeing it coming." "How could you have seen it coming?" Janet asked. "She's your daughter. You're supposed to be able to trust your children." But here's what I learned: trust is always a risk. Even especially with family. Maybe especially with family because that's where the largest vulnerabilities lie. The deepest access. The most opportunity. Diane saw vulnerability and opportunity and made a choice. That choice cost her everything that mattered. Her relationship with me. Her marriage. Her financial stability. Her freedom in the sense that she'll be on probation for 3 years and have a criminal record forever. Was it worth it to her? In those moments when she was forging ahead with her plan, when she was moving me into Meadowbrook and listing my house and selling pieces of my husband's collection, did she think about what she was risking? Did she imagine this outcome? I don't think so. I think she believed her own narrative. That I was declining. That she was helping. That she deserved the house because she'd be taking care of me, and this was just reallocation of assets within the family. I think she convinced herself that what she was doing was reasonable. Even noble. That I'd eventually thank her. The human capacity for self-deception is remarkable. People ask me sometimes, usually other elderly folks who've heard some version of this story, what they should do to protect themselves. How do you prevent your own children from doing what Diane did? I don't have a perfect answer. But I have thoughts. First, maintain your independence fiercely. The moment you become dependent, financially, physically, emotionally, you become vulnerable. Stay healthy. Stay active. Keep your finances organized and under your control for as long as possible. Second, document everything. I wish I'd started documenting sooner. Every concerning conversation. Every red flag. If I'd had records from the beginning, recordings, emails, a journal, it would have been much easier to prove what was happening. Third, don't sign anything under pressure. Ever. If someone is pushing you to make immediate legal decisions, that's a red flag. Real emergencies are rare. Most things can wait for you to consult an independent attorney. Fourth, have multiple trusted people in your life. Not just family. Friends, neighbors, your own attorney, your own doctor. People who see you regularly and can notice if something changes. I had Mrs. Chen and my book club and Daniel as backup. Without them, I'd have been completely isolated. Fifth, if you sense something is wrong, act immediately. Don't wait. Don't make excuses. Don't tell yourself you're being paranoid. Your instincts are usually right. And finally, accept that sometimes the people you love most are capable of terrible things. That doesn't mean you did something wrong as a parent or a person. It means they made choices. They're responsible for their choices, not you. I didn't fail Diane. She failed herself. I've thought about writing to her. Not to reconcile, I don't think that's possible, but to say what? That I'm sad about how things turned out? That I wish she'd been a different person? That I still remember the little girl she was, even though I can't forgive the woman she became? I've drafted letters in my head 100 times. I never send them. Maybe someday. Maybe when enough time has passed that the anger has faded into something else. Something quieter. Maybe resignation. Maybe just sadness. Or maybe never. Maybe some betrayals don't get neat resolutions. Maybe this is just the reality now. I had 2 children and now I functionally have one. I had a daughter and now I have a painful memory and a criminal court record with her name on it. Marcus asked me recently if I hate his mother. I thought about it carefully before answering. No, I don't hate her. I'm angry and I'm disappointed and I'm sad. But hate? That takes more energy than I want to give this. Do you think she's sorry? I think she's sorry she got caught. I think she's sorry she's facing consequences. Whether she's sorry for what she actually did, I don't know. I hope so. For her sake more than mine. He nodded slowly. For what it's worth, Grandma, I think you were really brave. What you did. How you fought back. Brave. I hadn't thought of it that way. It didn't feel brave at the time. It felt desperate. Necessary. Survival. But maybe that's what bravery is. Not the absence of fear, but doing what needs to be done anyway. The house is quiet now. Just me and my thoughts and my garden and my books. The life I built over 7 decades restored. Imperfect. Scarred. But mine. I've started volunteering again at the library. They were thrilled to have me back. I'm working with at-risk teenagers, helping them with college application essays and teaching them how powerful their own stories can be. One of them asked me last week if I had any regrets. Of course, I said. Everyone has regrets. Like what? I thought about all the possible answers. Marrying Thomas younger. Having more children. Taking that job offer in Boston when I was 30. Learning to be less trusting. I regret not seeing what was happening sooner, I told her. I regret not protecting myself better. But mostly I regret that my daughter became someone capable of what she did. That's not about my choices. That's about hers. But I still regret it. That's sad, the girl said. Yes, it is. But you're okay now? I smiled. I'm okay now. And mostly that's true. There's a sheriff's office in the county seat, about 20 minutes from my house. I drive by it sometimes and think about that note I left in the hidden compartment. The note that said, "Sheriff comes at 10 a.m. I never actually wrote that note. That was the imagined confrontation, the dramatic showdown. Reality was messier. Slower. More bureaucratic. Court dates and forensic accountants and APS investigations and plea deals. But the sentiment was right. Authority was coming. Consequences were coming. Justice, imperfect and slow as it was coming. Diane just didn't realize it until it was too late. And maybe that's the real moral of this story. Actions have consequences. Not always immediate ones. Not always dramatic ones. But eventually the bill comes due. She thought she was being clever. Calculated. That she'd covered her tracks well enough. That I was too old, too confused, too defeated to fight back effectively. She was wrong on all counts. I'm 72 years old. I taught difficult teenagers for 33 years. I raised 2 children. I buried a husband. I built a life through decades of work and sacrifice and compromise. Did she really think I'd go quietly? Did she really think I didn't know how to fight? The mistake people make about the elderly is assuming that age equals weakness. That we're passive. That we'll accept whatever's done to us because we're too tired or too confused to resist. Some people are. Some people have been beaten down by life and illness and loss until they don't have any fight left. But some of us? We're steel wrapped in wrinkles. We've survived decades of difficulties that would break younger people. We've learned patience and strategy and how to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. Diane learned that lesson the hard way. It's getting dark now. The October sun sets earlier each day. I should go inside, start dinner, maybe call Daniel or reply to the email Janet sent about next month's book club selection. But I'm sitting here in my garden, in my house, on my property, in my life that I fought to keep, and I'm allowing myself a moment of something like peace. It's not happiness. Not yet. Maybe not ever, not the uncomplicated kind. There's too much loss wrapped up in this victory. But it's mine. All of it. The pain and the triumph and the quiet evening and the house behind me with all its memories, good and bad. Nobody can take it from me now. I made sure of that. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love you see you as an obstacle instead of a person. Sometimes you have to fight for your own dignity, even against your own blood. And sometimes, just sometimes, the fight is worth it. Not because you win everything back, but because you prove to yourself that you're still here. Still standing. Still worth fighting for. Margaret Holloway is 72 years old. She lives alone in a house on Sycamore Drive. She tends her garden, attends book club, and volunteers at the library. She has 1 son who visits regularly and 2 grandchildren she sees sometimes. She had a daughter once, but that's a different story. One she's still learning to live with. But she's living. On her own terms. In her own house. With her own choices. And nobody, not her daughter, not a court, not anyone, can take that away from her again.